There is a morning in history that most people think they know. They know about the fire. They know about the wind. They have heard the story of the fisherman from Galilee who stood up and spoke in languages they had never studied, never heard, never practiced in their lives. What they don't know, what almost no one talks about, is the silence before it. It is early morning in Jerusalem. The city is already beginning to move outside the walls. Merchants setting up, pilgrims filling the streets for Pentecost, Roman soldiers changing positions at the gates. And in a second-floor room in the upper city, 120 people are sitting in a silence so thick you could press your hand against it. They have been waiting for 10 days. 10 days since Jesus ascended. 10 days since he told them to wait in Jerusalem for something he called the promise of the Father. 10 days of not knowing what that meant, not knowing what it would feel like when it arrived, not knowing what sound it would make, or what shape it would take, or whether they would even recognize it when it came. You know that feeling. The waiting room before something that changes everything. The morning before the result. The silence before the answer. That is where they are. And then, without warning, the room fills with sound. Not a breeze. Not a gentle wind. The Greek word Luke uses is bios. Violent, forceful, a wind that comes with intent. The sound fills the entire house. And then every person in the room sees what looks like tongues of fire, separating and resting. Not in the center of the room, not on the leaders, not on the most qualified, but on every single person there. And then they speak, Galilean fishermen, men whose accent in Jerusalem marked them immediately as outsiders, uneducated, low class, people who smelled like fish and had no business in the theological conversation. Those men begin to speak in the languages of the known world: Egyptian, Parthian, Cappadocian, Libyan, the dialects of people who had traveled weeks to be in Jerusalem for the festival. And every one of those travelers hears their own native tongue coming from the mouths of Galileans. The historian Josephus describes Jerusalem at Pentecost as one of the most crowded, cosmopolitan events in the ancient calendar. People from every corner of the empire packed into one city for 1 week. And what they heard that morning was not a performance. It was not a rehearsed, multilingual presentation. It was the most impossible sound any of them had ever heard. Truth, spoken in the language of home. But here's what almost no one tells you. What happened that morning was not the beginning of spiritual gifts. And it was not the end of them. And this is the part that changes everything. What happened in that room was never meant to stay in that room. This is not a story about one extraordinary day in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. This is not a story about speaking in tongues or visible fire or violent wind. This is not a story about apostles and eyewitnesses in the first century. This is a story about you and the specific, unrepeatable way God wired you in this century, in this body, in this life, to carry something the world around you desperately needs. Because the gifts did not stay in that upper room. They walked out of it. And they have been walking ever since. Before we go any further, I want you to hold 3 people in your mind. 3 people who walked into that upper room on the morning of Pentecost with no idea what was about to happen to them. A fisherman who had denied his Lord 3 times, publicly in a firelit courtyard with witnesses listening. A woman who had been the first to see the resurrection, who ran to tell the disciples, and whom none of them believed. And an old man who had walked with Jesus for 3 years and still didn't fully understand what the Spirit would feel like from the inside. None of them arrived that morning knowing what their gift was. All three left that room completely changed. We will come back to them before this video is over, because what happened to them will tell you something about what is already living inside you. Before we meet the people, we need to understand the word. In the original Greek of Paul's letters, spiritual gifts are called charismata. Say it slowly, charismata. It comes from charis, which means grace. Not skill, not talent, not personality type. Grace, something given freely, without the recipient earning it, without the recipient deserving it, without the recipient even fully understanding it. Most people have a completely wrong picture of what a spiritual gift is. They think it is a talent you were born with, something that showed up naturally and just happens to be useful in church. It is not. Plenty of talented people have no idea what the Spirit has placed in them, and plenty of people with no obvious natural talent carry a gift that changes rooms. They think it is something you choose, like picking a major or selecting a career path. It is not. You don't choose a charisma, you discover it, usually in a moment you didn't plan for. And they think it is reserved for the professionals, for pastors and missionaries and the people up front with microphones. It is not. Paul is absolutely clear on this. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 7. To each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. Each one. Not each ordained one, not each educated one, each one. That word manifestation is worth slowing down on. The Greek is phanerosis, from the verb phaneroo, to make visible what was invisible. Your gift is not something you perform. It is the place where the invisible Spirit of God becomes visible through a human body, through your body, through your hands or your voice or your presence in a room. Now, let's see what that looks like when it's real. 3 days before Pentecost, a fisherman named Peter is sitting in that upper room with a weight on him that hasn't lifted since a Thursday night in a high priest courtyard. You know what he did. 3 times, by firelight, to a servant girl and a group of strangers, he said the same words. I do not know this man. His Galilean accent, the rounded vowels, the way he swallowed his consonants, had given him away before he even opened his mouth. In Jerusalem, a Galilean accent was a social marker. It meant you were from the margins. It meant you were not the kind of person whose words carried weight. And now it is Sunday morning, 10 days later, and Peter has not given a single public speech since that courtyard. He has no sermon prepared, no notes, no theological argument rehearsed. He is sitting in a room with 119 other people, waiting for a promise he doesn't fully understand. Here's what most people miss about what happens next. Peter does not decide to stand up and preach. He does not work up courage. He does not feel suddenly confident. What happens is that the moment requires it, and the gift moves in him before his mind catches up with it. Acts chapter 2, verse 14. Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice. That phrase, raised his voice, is the same phrase used in the Greek Old Testament for prophets speaking under the weight of divine urgency. Peter doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't warm up. He opens his mouth and 3,000 people on the street below, a second-story window, stop walking. His Galilean accent, the same accent that marked him as an outsider 3 days earlier, is now carrying the first sermon of the Christian church. 3,000 people are baptized that day. The gift of leadership does not wait until you feel qualified. It shows up in the moment someone needs you to stand. Now I want to take you somewhere quieter, a city called Joppa, a second-floor room, and a woman whose name Luke gives us in 2 languages. Tabitha in Aramaic, Dorcas in Greek. Both mean the same thing, gazelle. Luke almost never does this. When he names someone in two languages, he is signaling this person mattered to two worlds. Acts 9, verse 36 tells us almost everything you need to know about her in one sentence. She was always doing good and helping the poor. Not occasionally, not when it was convenient, always. The Greek is a continuous action verb. This was not a project she undertook. It was who she was, and then she dies. When Peter arrives, the widows of Joppa are gathered in the upper room beside her body. They are not holding scrolls. They are not reciting her theological convictions. They are holding clothing, robes she sewed, garments she made with her hands for women who had no one else to make them anything. The gift of service is so quiet that sometimes the only way the world sees it clearly is when it's gone. The Greek word Paul uses in 1 Corinthians 14 for what gifts are supposed to do is oikodomi, literally to build a house. One brick at a time, one meal, one garment, one visit. Tabitha had been building something invisible her entire life. The dignity of women nobody else was paying attention to. Peter kneels beside her body. He prays. He turns to her and says her name, Tabitha. She opens her eyes. Two people, two completely different gifts. One was loud and public and changed a city in a single morning. One was quiet and private and built something that only became visible when it stopped being built. Both were given by the same Spirit. Both were called charismata. Both were given not for the person who carried them, but for the people who needed them. Two people. And already you can see that the gifts of the Spirit do not fit one mold. Peter's gift looked like standing up in front of thousands when you had every reason to stay seated. Tabitha's gift looked like thread and needle and the names of women nobody else remembered. Same Spirit, completely different expressions. And we are only getting started. We still have to talk about the man who stood in a church meeting and predicted an empire-wide famine and was proven right by Roman historians. The food administrator who ended up delivering the most powerful sermon in the book of Acts, and the businesswoman whose wealth became the infrastructure of a movement that changed the world. If this is opening something up for you, hit subscribe right now, because the next section is where the gifts get personal, and personal is exactly what you need. Let's talk about a man chosen to distribute food. His name is Stephen. And if you had been watching from the outside, you would have thought his story was about administration, about solving a logistics problem. The early church was growing fast in Jerusalem, and the widows in the Greek-speaking community were being overlooked in the daily food distribution. The apostles needed someone trustworthy to handle the practical work. They chose 7 men. Stephen was one of them. His job description had nothing to do with preaching, nothing to do with miracles. He was chosen because he was full of faith and of the Holy Spirit. Acts chapter 6, verse 5. And because someone needed to make sure the right people got fed on the right days. And then something happens that no one in that room planned for, but it gets stranger. Stephen's gift of wisdom overflows the task he was assigned. He begins to speak in the synagogues about Jesus, and he speaks with such authority, such clarity, such depth, that the people debating him cannot find a foothold. They bring false charges. They drag him before the Sanhedrin. Picture what the Sanhedrin was. The historian Josephus describes it as the supreme court of Jewish life. 71 of the most educated, most powerful religious leaders in Jerusalem. The same body that had condemned Jesus. These men had spent their entire lives studying Torah. They ate, breathed, and slept the scriptures of Israel. And Stephen, the food administrator, teaches them their own history back to them. He begins with Abraham in Mesopotamia, and he doesn't stop until he reaches Solomon's temple. His speech in Acts chapter 7 is the longest in the entire book of Acts and the most theologically precise thing in it. And when he finishes, when he tells them plainly that they have betrayed and murdered the righteous one, Luke records something that stops every reader cold. The members of the Sanhedrin look at Stephen's face, and it looks like the face of an angel. They drag him outside the city and stone him. And as the rocks fall, Stephen kneels. His last words, not a cry for help, not a curse, not a desperate prayer for rescue, are these: Lord, do not hold this sin against them. His gift of wisdom did not protect him from suffering. It walked him straight into it. And the gift kept operating all the way to the ground. Pay attention to this. A young man named Saul is standing at the edge of the crowd, holding the coats of the men doing the throwing. He is watching Stephen die. And something about the way Stephen dies, that face, those last words, plants a seed in Saul of Tarsus that will not stop growing until the day a light knocks him off a horse on the road to Damascus. The gift of wisdom does not always give you the outcome you want. Sometimes it gives the person watching you the beginning of a story that changes the world. Now, I want to take you to a church meeting in Antioch, roughly 12 years after Pentecost. A man named Agabus stands up. We know almost nothing about Agabus. We don't know his tribe, his background, his age. Luke names him twice in Acts, chapter 11 and chapter 21, and both times he appears for one purpose: to say something the Spirit has shown him that no one else can see. In Antioch, he stands and announces that a severe famine is coming across the entire Roman world. He names the emperor, Claudius. He gives enough specific detail that the church takes him seriously enough to immediately organize a relief fund for believers in Judea. And this is where it gets remarkable. The Roman historian Suetonius and the Jewish historian Josephus both document a series of famines during the reign of Claudius, roughly AD 46 to 48. What Agabus said in that church meeting was later confirmed by two secular historians who had no interest in making Christians look credible. This is the gift of prophecy in its most raw form. Not entertainment, not inspiration, not a vague sense that things will work out. Specific, verifiable, costly information, delivered with enough clarity that people act on it before the event occurs. The Greek word underlying Paul's description of this gift is paraklesis, the same root as paraclete, the name Jesus gives the Holy Spirit in the Gospel of John, the comforter, the one who comes alongside. When the gift of prophecy operates the way it is supposed to, it is not about impressive prediction. It is about the Spirit coming alongside a frightened, confused, or unprepared community and giving them what they need to face what is coming. Agabus appears one more time in Acts chapter 21. He finds Paul in Caesarea, takes Paul's belt, and binds his own hands and feet. In this way, the Jews of Jerusalem will bind the owner of this belt. Paul's friends beg him not to go. Paul goes anyway. The gift of prophecy cost the prophet something. Agabus didn't simply speak the hard thing, he put it on his own body first. The year is approximately AD 67. Paul is in a Roman prison for the second time, and this time it is different. No house arrest, no visitors moving freely in and out. The tradition of the early church places him in the Mamertine prison, cut into the rock beneath the Roman Forum. Cold, dark, the kind of place Rome put people it had decided to forget. He picks up a pen, and he writes to a young man in Ephesus named Timothy. The letter begins not with doctrine or instruction, but with a memory. I am reminded, Paul writes, of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice. 3 generations, one flame, passed from a grandmother's hands to a mother's hands to the hands of a young man now leading a church in one of the most complicated cities in the Roman world. Ephesus was not a gentle assignment. It was a city of competing religions, active persecution, and a congregation that was already beginning to fracture. Timothy was young. He was reportedly timid by nature, and the people he was leading were not making it easy for him. Paul knows all of this, and what he writes next is not a theological argument. It is not a strategic plan. It is something far more personal than either of those things. Fan into flame the gift of God which is in you. Stay with me. That word, fan into flame, is a single Greek verb, anazapurio. It means to rekindle, to blow air onto a fire that has gone low, not to start a new fire, not to find a different fire, to return to the one that is already there, already real, already given, and give it air. Paul is not telling Timothy to search for something he doesn't have. He is telling him to return to something he has neglected. The gift was given at his commissioning. The flame was lit in him by Lois, by Eunice, by years of faith handed down through the ordinary warmth of a family who believed before he knew what believing meant. But somewhere in the difficulty of Ephesus, in the criticism, in the exhaustion, in the weight of leading people who pushed back, the flame had gone low. I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. Is there a gift in you that you stopped feeding? Not a talent you never developed. Not an ability you never discovered. A gift. Something the Spirit placed in you. Something that has moved through you in real moments. Something you have seen operate with a power that surprised even you. That you quietly let go cold. Because the people around you didn't respond the way you hoped. Because you tried once and it was hard. Because somewhere along the way, someone told you, directly or indirectly, that what you carried wasn't valuable enough to keep carrying. Here's the part of this story that nobody frames this way. Paul doesn't write to Timothy and say, find a new gift. He doesn't say, maybe leadership isn't for you after all. He says, fan this one, the same one, the one your grandmother touched, the one your mother carried, that specific flame in that specific person in that specific city. Fan it. The church historian Justin Martyr, writing in the 2nd century, just decades after Paul's death, documented that spiritual gifts were still operating in ordinary congregations, not with apostles, not with famous leaders, but with regular men and women in churches across the empire. People healing the sick, people speaking prophetically into hard situations, people teaching with authority they hadn't earned in any school. The gifts didn't stop when the eyewitnesses died. They kept moving into every willing person in every century since. If you have been sitting with a gift that has gone quiet, this is your moment. The envelope is still sealed. The flame is still there. It just needs air. If something just shifted in you while I was talking, I want you to stay to the very end of this video, because in the last few minutes, I am going to give you 3 specific things to carry out of this conversation. Don't close the tab yet. Now, I want to come back to those three people I mentioned at the very beginning: the fisherman, the woman no one believed, the old man. Peter stood up on the morning of Pentecost with his Galilean accent and his recent failure and no prepared remarks. And the gift of leadership moved through him so completely that 3,000 people responded before he finished his first sentence. He didn't go looking for that gift. He was in the room when the room needed it. Mary Magdalene went to a tomb before sunrise on a Sunday morning because she could not stay away. Everyone else had locked the doors. She stayed. She was the first to see. She ran to tell people who dismissed her, and she told them anyway. Her gift was not power, it was presence. Staying when staying cost everything. Believing when no one around her did. That is the gift of faith. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear be the last word. And John, the old man who had outlived almost everyone he began with, exiled by the Roman Emperor Domitian to a volcanic island in the Aegean Sea called Patmos, alone, the end of everything by any reasonable measure. And the same spirit that filled that upper room finds him on a black rock in the middle of the ocean and gives him visions that scholars and theologians and ordinary believers are still studying 2,000 years later. Your gift is not the thing you are best at. Your gift is not the thing you enjoy most. Your gift is not the thing that comes easiest to you. Your gift is the thing that, when the moment requires it, flows through you with a power that surprises even you. The thing that happens when you stop managing it and let it move. Peter didn't plan his gift. Mary didn't audition for hers. John received his on an island with no audience. None of them went looking. Their gift found them in the moment it was needed most. And yours will too. Before you close this video, I want to leave you with three things. The first is a fact. The New Testament names more than 20 distinct spiritual gifts across 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, and Ephesians 4. Wisdom, knowledge, faith, healing, prophecy, teaching, service, giving, mercy, leadership, discernment, exhortation. The list is longer than most people realize, and it is more personal than most people expect. And Paul places one sentence at the center of all of it. A sentence that leaves no room for misunderstanding. To each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. Not each pastor, not each seminary graduate, not each person who has figured out their theology. Each one. That includes you. It has always included you. The second is personal. Your gift was not designed for your comfort. It was not given to make your life easier or to make you feel special or to give you a platform. Every person we looked at today, Peter, Tabitha, Stephen, Agabus, Lydia, Timothy, used their gift in a moment that cost them something. Peter stood up with a failure still fresh on him. Tabitha served people no one else saw until she was gone. Stephen delivered the truth to people who killed him for it. Your gift will ask something of you. That is not a warning. That is the design. The gift was given for the person who needs it, not the person who carries it. And the third, the one I want you to carry out of this video, is this. Timothy's flame went low, not because the gift was taken, not because he failed, not because God changed his mind. It went low because life is heavy and Ephesus was hard. And sometimes the most faithful people are the ones standing quietly in a difficult room, wondering if what they carry still matters.